You see that old man? Been sitting there every damn evening. Says he's waiting on a submarine. But not all ghosts wear chains. Some wear silence. Every evening at 5:30, he sat alone on that cliff. Same coat, same wooden chair, eyes fixed on the horizon like he was listening for something only he could hear. Most folks passed him by. Some laughed. Others felt sorry. But nobody ever stopped until yesterday. The sea trembled. The horizon split. And a submarine, black, silent, unmarked, surfaced right where he always sat. They didn't wave. They didn't speak. They saluted him. Then he stood, and the truth surfaced with them. Stay with us. What surfaced that day wasn't just a submarine. It was a secret buried for decades. His name was Victor Harrison, though no one in the town used it anymore. Most just called him Old Vic, and a few, less kindly, called him the Cliff Ghost. He was a wiry man, maybe 80 if not older, with a stooped back and long, quiet strides. Always wore the same wool coat, even in summer. The salt and wind had worn it into the color of the rocks he sat near. His face was carved deep by time and storms, and his eyes, pale blue, distant, always seemed fixed on a point far beyond the horizon, as if looking at something no one else could see, or maybe listening for something only he remembered. Vic lived alone in a small wooden shack perched on the edge of a coastal bluff. It wasn't much. The roof sagged. The windows rattled. The paint had long surrendered to the sea wind. He had no electricity, no running water, no phone, no internet. Inside there was a cot, a wood stove, and a radio. Not the kind that played music. This one had a frequency dial so precise it looked military, which in fact it was. Every morning was the same. He'd rise at dawn, boil water on the stove, stare into his mug like it held memories instead of coffee. Then just before 5:30 p.m., he'd take an old wooden chair and carry it across the narrow trail to the cliff's edge. In one hand, he always brought a small, locked wooden box. Never opened, never left behind. There, facing the ocean, he'd sit in absolute stillness, not moving, not blinking, just waiting. Locals had grown used to him. At first, kids would dare each other to sneak up and ask what he was doing. He never answered. Some said he was mute. Others swore they'd heard him whispering in a strange language. Maybe Russian. Rumors ran wild. The younger ones in town laughed. He's waiting for whales. Nah, he thinks a ghost ship's coming. I heard he used to be a spy. At the bar, you'd hear things like, Old Vic's got a screw loose. Probably fried his brain in Nam or some Cold War mess. Still carries that damn box like it's the nuclear codes. But none of them really knew, because no one asked. No one ever got close enough. The truth was, Vic never asked for anything. He didn't beg. He didn't complain. He came into town once every 2 weeks, bought dried beans, canned food, oil for the lamp, paid in exact cash, nodded, then left. Never started conversation, never stayed long. People eventually learned to leave him alone, like the tide or the gulls or the broken fence by the coast that no one bothered fixing anymore. He became part of the scenery, a strange fixture, like an old statue no one remembered putting there. But there was something about the way he sat. It wasn't senility, it wasn't confusion, it was discipline, like a man used to waiting for orders, like a soldier still listening for a call that never came. And then one day, it did. His name was Nathan Reed, a 16-year-old kid who lived with his mother in the small town by the cliffs. He'd never left the area, but every single day, without fail, he saw that old man, always at 5:30 p.m., always alone. And while most people ignored or mocked him, Nathan was the kind of boy who noticed the things others didn't. Like the way the man sat, not lost, but waiting for something. One afternoon when the wind was unusually still, Nathan walked a little closer than usual, not enough to be rude, but enough to get a better look. Victor Harrison didn't turn around. He just sat in that same battered wooden chair, facing the sea, a locked wooden box balanced carefully on his knees. Nathan sat nearby, pretending to toss pebbles, his eyes quietly studying the man. "You waiting for someone?" Nathan asked, not expecting a reply. But the old man did reply, slowly, hoarsely. Not someone, he said. Something. Nathan started coming around more often. Not to interrogate, not to bother, just to be nearby. There was a kind of gravity around the old man, the way he sat, the stillness of it. One day, Nathan asked him about the ocean currents and was stunned when the man answered in complex, technical detail. Things about thermal layers, sonar shadow zones, submarine trench acoustics. When Nathan asked how he knew all that, Victor only raised an eyebrow. "You study naval engineering?" the old man asked. "No," Nathan shrugged. "I just like boats." Victor almost smiled. Almost. Then came the moment that changed everything. One overcast afternoon, Nathan arrived early. The old man wasn't at the cliff yet. Curious, Nathan followed the narrow trail to the shack, not to intrude, just to say hello. But when he reached the crooked door, he froze. Inside, Victor was seated in silence, both hands resting atop the wooden box. His eyes were closed, but his lips were moving, whispering words not meant for anyone else. "Is anyone still alive? Tide 7. Do you copy? Can anyone hear me?" The voice wasn't loud. It wasn't desperate. It was practiced. Like a ritual repeated for years, even if no one ever answered. Nathan backed away quietly and ran home. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't even tell himself what it meant. That night he couldn't sleep. The wind outside seemed to carry whispers from the waves. Sometime after midnight, Nathan got up and slipped out the door. He followed the moonlit trail to the cliffs again, just to be sure, to see if the old man was still real, still just strange, not dangerous. But as he approached the shack, he stopped cold. There was a sound, click, crackle, a radio, not music, not weather, military. Through the wooden wall, Nathan could hear it, faint, broken, but unmistakable. "Echo tide, come in, verify gold return, 47 silent, awaiting clearance, repeat." Nathan's skin prickled. His father had been in the Signal Corps. He used to test old radio sets when Nathan was little. This was a real encrypted transmission, not fantasy, not delusion. The voice on the radio was real. So was the silence that followed. Then, darkness. The lantern inside the shack went out. Nobody came out. No one spoke. Just the sea wind and the pulse of something Nathan couldn't explain. He turned and ran, but the voice stayed with him. Gold return, echo tide, and the question Victor had whispered. Is anyone still alive? Something was happening. Something buried. Something waiting. 1974, the North Pacific. A black submarine sliced silently through the icy depths, undetected, unseen. Its name wasn't listed in public records. Its crew didn't exist, and its mission was never meant to be remembered. They were called Tide Unit 7, a deep-water reconnaissance and covert deployment team operating under the highest clearance in the U.S. Navy. At the helm of this ghost vessel, Lieutenant Commander Victor Harrison, known then simply as Vic. He was 29, sharp-eyed, steel-voiced, and respected. Not loud, not flashy, but absolutely in control. His team followed him without question, not out of fear, but because he carried the silence of a man who'd seen too much and never flinched. Their assignment was simple, at least on paper. Infiltrate the edge of Soviet waters. Deploy a top-secret sensor array, a revolutionary underwater surveillance system designed to intercept naval acoustic signatures and monitor deep-sea missile movement in real time. It was called Operation Echo Tide. The payload was embedded with radioactive tracers to power and amplify long-range data pings across the ocean floor. Dangerous, yes, but necessary. The drop was smooth, precision perfect. The equipment was anchored to the sea floor, set to passive scan. Then, something went wrong. 12 hours into extraction, the team detected anomalous radiation surges from the deployed array. It shouldn't have happened. The tech was classified, untested, and unstable. Within minutes, a pressure leak formed. The radiation containment seal cracked. Data showed a microspike in the current, which, if detected, could lead Soviet sonar directly to them. Panic rippled through the crew, not fear for their lives, but fear of being discovered, captured, interrogated. The mission had no political cover. If caught, the United States would deny their existence. Vic gathered his officers. "We're not going home," he said quietly. "We're going dark." He gave the order that no commander ever wanted to give. Full covert seal, all signals terminated, zero surface protocol. If we surface, the war starts. If we vanish, it doesn't. One by one, the crew nodded. One by one, they disconnected from the world. No radio, no pings, no transmissions. The submarine vanished into the deep. 3 weeks later, the Navy issued a press release. Tide Unit 7 presumed lost. All 47 members declared dead following presumed equipment malfunction during training. A closed-door ceremony was held. No names read, no flags folded, only a list of numbers on a wall that didn't officially exist. But Vic wasn't dead. At the last moment, when the radiation spike grew unstable, he was ordered to abandon ship. Only him. The system had recorded his biometric override, and Central Command needed a final fail-safe retrieval officer in case the array survived. He didn't want to go. He fought it. But the order was final. He surfaced alone. They met him with decontamination crews, a blacked-out transport plane, and a final warning. "You never speak of this. You were never there. No one survived." He never saw the crew again. He never knew if the ship collapsed, if the array detonated, if anyone else was pulled out later. The mission was buried, the files classified as lost, the project shut down. But something inside him refused to let it end there. So he disappeared, not into the system, but out of it. He chose the coastline nearest the last ping, where the submarine was meant to resurface for pickup, the place they'd agreed upon before everything fell apart. And there, he waited, day after day, year after year, listening to the sea, listening to the static, waiting for one final signal, the only signal that mattered. Echo tide, gold return. It never came. Until now. In his shack sat that same encrypted radio system, modified by Vic's own hands, tuned endlessly through old ghostly frequencies long abandoned by modern tech. Most days it was silent. Others it whispered echoes, fragments, distortions, perhaps nothing. But he always listened, always brought the box. Inside it, the mission core key, a last-ditch reactivation trigger, meant to confirm identity if Ecotide was ever recovered. He hadn't opened it in decades, but he never left it behind. Because if even one man, one crew member, one transmission survived, then the mission wasn't over. And he wasn't finished. The sea had been uneasy all day. Winds lashed harder than usual, and the sky churned with low, slate-gray clouds. Seagulls flew lower, restless. Even the fishermen docked early, muttering about bad omens, unfinished tides. Nathan had wandered the cliffs again, half out of routine, half out of a strange instinct he couldn't explain. For weeks now, ever since that night with the radio, he hadn't been able to stop thinking about it. And today felt different. The air tasted electric. He followed the winding path toward the shack. The old man hadn't come out yet. Strange, since it was already near 5. That was late for Vic. He was always early, always precise. Nathan approached quietly, and then he heard it. Click, crackle, whir. Inside the shack, the radio, the old military set no one believed could still work, came alive. A voice, mechanical, layered under heavy static, but real. Call sign, Echo Tide 7. Surface protocol, gold return. Repeat. Echo Tide 7. Confirm identity. Gold return active. Nathan's breath hitched. Inside, he heard the old wooden chair scrape back sharply. Then, silence. For a long moment, all he could hear was the wind against the shack. Then, the unmistakable sound of a metal latch snapping open. Victor Harrison stood motionless over the small table, eyes fixed on the radio. He hadn't heard that phrase in over 50 years. He'd dreamed of it, hoped for it, whispered it into the wind, but he'd never truly believed it would come back. And now the signal was clear. The code was exact. With trembling hands, he pulled the wooden box closer. His fingers hesitated over the brass latches. They were stiff from salt and time. He undid both. Slow, deliberate. Inside, a single cylindrical device, smooth black metal, engraved with his old unit's sigil. Tied Unit 7. At the base of the device, a small rotary seal sat dormant, the kind only the mission commander could engage. His thumb hovered over it. He closed his eyes. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, he pressed. The cylinder pulsed softly. One green light, then a quiet chirp. The signal was confirmed. The chain of command had just been reactivated. Nathan didn't wait. He ran. He tore down the path into the village, burst into the local pub, out of breath and eyes wide. The old man, Victor, he got a signal. It's real. Something's happening. The bartender raised an eyebrow. Kid, what do you want about now? The radio. He said it. Echo Tide 7. He opened the box. It lit up. I saw it. Someone laughed. Maybe the submarine finally showed up, huh? Nathan's voice shook. I'm not kidding. But no one moved. No one followed. He turned and ran back. By the time Nathan returned to the cliffs, Victor was already standing there, alone, staring out over the ocean. He held the black cylinder gently in one hand, down by his side. His coat flapped in the wind. His feet planted firm on the grass that had been shaped by years of his silent vigil. He didn't look at Nathan. He didn't speak. He was listening. Far out on the horizon, the sea began to shift. Not violently, but deliberately, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. Nathan stood behind him, unsure whether to speak, to move. He didn't. Something was coming, and Victor knew. He had waited decades for this, not to be rescued, not to be thanked, but to finish what others had tried to erase. That night, the village would sleep through it, but by morning, everyone would know. The old man on the cliff wasn't waiting for nothing. He was waiting for a return signal from a mission the world had buried, and a vessel the sea never gave back, until now. It began with a sound no one else heard, not thunder, not wind, but something older, heavier, a low hum, as if the ocean itself was bracing for something it couldn't contain. The waves began to pull back unnaturally, their rhythm reversed, their cadence offbeat. Nathan froze where he stood on the cliff's edge. The salt in the air thickened. The horizon seemed to shift, not visually, but emotionally, like an invisible pressure had just entered the atmosphere. Victor Harrison stood a few paces ahead, calm, unmoving. His long coat flapped gently in the sea breeze. He held the small activation cylinder in his right hand, fingers closed but not clenched. His left hand rested on the wooden box, now empty, tucked under his arm. He didn't flinch. He had waited half a century for this. And then it came. Far beyond the rocks, just beyond the reach of the last sandbar, the sea cracked open. A wide ripple formed. Not from wind, but from pressure. The water displaced itself in a perfect circle. From the center of it, metal rose. At first, Nathan thought it was a rock shelf surfacing, some forgotten fragment of coastline, but the shape was too exact, too deliberate. It wasn't a rock. It was a submarine. A massive, sleek black vessel pierced the surface, breaking through with silent command. The ocean surged outward from its presence, bowing to it. No crests, no thunder, only awe. There were no lights, no flag, no number. Only one mark, a faint emblem, oxidized by salt and age, just below the conning tower. V7, Victor's unit, Tied Unit 7, the crew that was never supposed to exist. Nathan gasped aloud. His breath caught in his throat. Every instinct told him to run, but his legs refused. The submarine hovered silently just off the shore, as if waiting. And then, a hiss. Near the center hatch, a panel slid open, smooth and intentional. Steam rolled outward and dissolved into the cold sea air. A black ladder extended, unfurling like a ritual long prepared. A figure emerged. He wasn't old. He wasn't ghostly. He was alive, young, maybe 30, maybe younger. A clean-cut soldier in a black uniform, without rank markings or national tags. His face was pale, focused, his movements exact. He stepped fully onto the deck and saluted, not toward the horizon, toward Victor. Victor responded only by stepping forward. He didn't rush. He didn't speak. He walked slowly down the cliff path and onto the flattened sand. The tide had pulled back far enough to create a natural path, as if the sea itself made way. Nathan followed, stunned. He had no words, only questions that grew heavier with each step. Victor stopped at the edge of the sandbar, facing the vessel that had stolen his past, and now returned to claim his present. He lifted the small black cylinder. The green light blinked once, then again, then glowed steadily. The submarine responded. A tone, low, harmonic, echoed softly across the water. The man atop the hull stepped down the ladder with precision. When his boots touched the sand, he approached Victor, stopping 3 feet away. He stood at attention, and then he spoke. "We've been waiting, sir." Victor looked him over, not with suspicion, but with a gaze that searched history. This was impossible. No one should have survived. The unit was declared lost, buried. "Who are you?" Victor asked. "Lieutenant Arden Hale, Tide Unit 7, Recovered Extension Division. I was born below." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Below? Your crew split. Half remained in deep hold. Some passed. Some were extracted. Others adapted. I'm part of the second generation." The words hit like waves in the dark. "You were born on board?" "Grown, sir. Engineered for deep silence. For continuation." "Continuation of what?" "The mission. Echo Tide." Victor clenched his jaw. "That mission was scrapped, classified, shut down. To the world, yes, but not to those who stayed beneath." Victor turned to look back at the cliffs, where Nathan stood watching, eyes wide, unmoving. He turned back. "Why surface now?" he asked. "Gold return. You activated the code. It reauthorized command re-entry. I didn't think it would work. It did. You were heard." For the first time in decades, Victor's hand shook. "How many are left?" 7 crew from the original manifest, 4 second gen, 2 command AIs. The rest, gone. Victor nodded slowly. The wind picked up again, not violently, but with momentum. The ocean behind them shifted once more, as if beckoning. Arden extended a hand, not in offering, but in invitation. Victor looked down at the cylinder one last time. The green light still glowed, pulsing now, not signaling, calling. Without a word, Victor reached into the wooden box once more. He withdrew a second object, a dog tag, weathered and worn. On it, Harrison, V. V7. He placed it gently in Arden's palm. "Take me home." Arden saluted again, then turned toward the ladder. Victor followed. Step by step, he ascended. Nathan couldn't breathe. He watched as the man who was once a mystery climbed into a past that had come back for him. When both men disappeared into the hatch, the door sealed behind them. The submarine paused, then without fanfare, descended. No whirlpool, no chaos, just silence and ripples. The sea claimed it again, as if it had never been there. Only the memory remained, and one boy who had seen it all. Nathan stood there long after the tide returned, his shoes wet, eyes locked on the empty water. He wasn't waiting for something to return, Nathan whispered. He was waiting to return to it. And with that, the sun dipped behind the clouds, and the world moved on, never knowing what had surfaced or why it had left again. Victor paused at the base of the submarine's ladder. The sea was quiet now. The wind had stilled. The tide held its breath. Just before he climbed aboard, he turned slowly and looked back. Nathan stood where the sand met rock, chest rising and falling, eyes wide with a mixture of awe, fear, and something else, reverence. For a moment, it was just the two of them and the silence of the sea between them. Then Victor spoke, calm, low, but deliberate. "Remember this, son. The quietest men often carry the loudest wars inside them. And they're usually the ones who keep peace longest, because they know its cost. Nathan swallowed hard, blinking against the salt in his eyes. He wanted to say something, anything, but no words came. Victor gave a faint nod. Not goodbye. Recognition. Then, without fanfare, he turned and climbed the final steps into the black mouth of the submarine. The hatch sealed behind him with a smooth metallic hiss. There were no alarms, no final salute, no one else to bear witness but a single boy. And the sea. The submarine, black and vast, remained for only a moment longer. Then it began to slip beneath the surface. Not violently, not loudly, just vanishing. Water folded over it gently, like memory reclaiming something it had hidden for too long. There were no waves, no splash, only ripples. And then it was gone. The tide resumed its slow crawl back toward shore, erasing footprints, washing away the path Victor had taken. Within minutes, it was as if no one had ever been there. Nathan stood frozen, his heart pounding louder than the sea around him. He stayed there long after the sky had darkened, long after the stars appeared. He stayed until the wind picked up again, and the world around him began to move as if nothing had happened. But he knew something had, something huge, something sacred. By morning, the village stirred awake as it always did. Shutters creaked, radios buzzed, cars rolled over gravel roads. No headlines appeared, no news alerts, no Navy helicopters or curious tourists. The world went on, blissfully unaware. But at the cliff's edge, something had changed. Where Victor used to sit, the same old bench weathered by sun and salt, someone had placed a small object. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud. It was a golden insignia, about the size of a coin, fixed cleanly into the wood, polished and gleaming against the grain. No label, no plaque, just the mark, Tide Unit 7. And beneath it, barely visible unless the light hit just right. We were here. We kept the silence. People walked by it that day. Some noticed, most didn't. A few paused, frowned, and muttered something about that strange old man. But Nathan saw it. He stood in front of it for a long while, backpack still slung over one shoulder, wind tugging at his sleeves. He didn't touch it. He didn't speak. He just stood there, like Victor used to, facing the sea. He finally understood. Victor Harrison hadn't been waiting for salvation. He hadn't been hoping for recognition. He had been guarding something, a memory, a promise, a mission that didn't end when the orders did. And in the end, when the sea called him back, he answered, the same way he had lived, quietly. We spend our days walking past people, on buses, in parks, at grocery stores, on benches near the water. We glance, we pass, we forget. And yet, how many of them carry stories never told? How many of them lived lives that shaped our world, yet left no trace in our history books? Victor Harrison was one of those people. To most, he was just a strange old man, a local ghost, a harmless figure sitting by the cliffs, day after day, year after year. But to a few, to those who took the time to really look, he was something else entirely. A man who carried the weight of silence, not because he was broken, but because he had been trusted to keep the peace at its most fragile edge. He didn't ask for thanks. He didn't write a book. He didn't speak of what he saw or who he lost. He simply waited, quietly, faithfully, for a signal the world had forgotten. But silence does not mean absence, and solitude is not the same as insignificance. Sometimes the ones who speak the least have seen the most. And so I ask you, how many people are walking among us, their histories tucked into faded jackets, old dog tags, or quiet habits? How many names will disappear? Not because they were never brave, but because no one ever asked. If you've ever met someone like Victor, someone quiet, constant, unknowable, share their story in the comments below. Tell us about the time your grandfather never talked about, or that neighbor who always locked their radio to one strange frequency, or the woman at the diner with the faraway eyes. These people deserve to be seen, not in parades, not in headlines, but in memory, in human connection. And maybe next time you're out by the shore and you see someone sitting alone, staring into the sea, don't just pass them by. Ask their name, because you might just be standing next to a piece of history. Thank you for listening. Truly. If this story moved you, please consider giving it a like, sharing it with someone who understands, and subscribing to the channel. Here we tell the stories that don't make the front page, but linger in the heart. And remember, if you ever see an old man quietly watching the tide come in, don't assume he's waiting for nothing. Ask his name.